Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, July the 31st, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day. And I'm happy to report that those of you who were trying to listen to yesterday afternoon's podcast live and couldn't find the player on the homepage of the website, well, that's been fixed. I have to say I was perplexed. I wasn't quite sure why it went away in the first place, but it did, and now it's back, and we're going to just celebrate that. But it was strange, Cindie. I mean, I did figure out why it went away in the sense that I found where the setting went wrong. I just don't know why the setting went wrong. I can't think of a reason for it. So maybe I attracted it. I don't know. Whatever.
I don't know. I think they call this the ghost in the machine.
Yeah, it really was.
You know, it happens occasionally. It's just one of those things, I guess. And
well, without getting too technical, the WordPress website that I have has a particular theme. A theme is like the look and feel of a website, and this particular theme is one that I've used for many years to build websites, and it's a really great method. This particular theme it gives you lots of power to do stuff, but it does have one little glitch in it, and I have a feeling this glitch is what caused that to go away. It has this one little glitch where there's one little section. If you save one thing, another thing will get changed when it's not supposed to. I suspect that's what happened. But
yeah, I know plugins will do that too sometimes.
Yeah, plugins can do that. That's possible.
One of them updates and everything gets cranky. But
oh yes, cranky. That's a good description. I like that.
Yeah. But we're here today.
We are. We're alive. We're doing good. You know, life is a good thing. And we are also getting ready to jump into the next section of the book we're talking about.
I know, I'm excited about that.
We noticed that this morning that we hadn't noticed it.
Well, it's so funny because I put the bookmark there when we finished up last time. So I must have noticed at that point that, hey, we've moved to the next section. And then this morning, I just didn't pay any attention to it. But, you know, this morning, I was telling you before the show, I kept dreaming that my alarm was going off.
Which really sucks. I mean, that just plain sucks. Your alarm clock going off all night?
And so, I mean, it's hard to estimate the time, but it felt like for at least a half an hour, I kept dreaming my alarm was going off. I also dreamed that someone turned my alarm off before it,
Sure.
Before it went off, and that someone said, oh yeah, it's okay, like we'll wake her up, don't worry about the alarm. I mean, I was having all these crazy dreams about my alarm.
So you just have to have a dream about hitting the snooze button and it just stays off.
Well, I had this slight wakefulness of reasoning with myself, saying if your alarm was going off, you would hear it. It didn't go off. And finally I thought, okay, just wake up and look at the clock. And it was like 5 something. And I was like, oh my goodness, like stop. Because, it's like that last hour of sleep.
Oh, yeah. That last one's the one you want the most, of course.
So I just did my mantra, I love my life.
Oh, how's that been going?
Tomorrow's day 10.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, honestly, I didn't stick to doing the mantra every day. But I have been switching it out because, like I was telling Patty yesterday, Patty Framo, one of the new co-hosts here, I don't do well when I repeat the same thing over and over again. It wears on me, and I lose interest after a while. So I kept mixing it up. I made that one and did that one for a bit, and I would do. I want to feel even better than I do now, and I had a number of them that I was trying out, but I wasn't doing it every day. It's been kind of like a hit or miss. Like, okay, I'm going to do it today. Yep, I'm doing it today. Oh, and next day I forgot to do it. Oh, I forgot to do it yesterday. Let's do it again today. Yeah, that kind of thing. So my week wasn't quite as successful. I hope yours was more successful than that.
Well, it has been. I'll tell you something funny. Remember back whenever it was, months ago, when we started the book and I did 10 days of I Feel Rich. And on the second day, we got the $50 gift card in the mail for the restaurant.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I got it on the second day of this.
Really?
I went out and checked the mail, and I was like, oh, you got to be kidding.
Oh, my goodness. You got it again?
That's so funny.
That is wild. That is wild. I mean, while you're doing affirmations, and how much time had lapsed between the last time you did this affirmation thing for 10 days and this time, although the affirmation itself was different? It's been like a few months, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's been a few months.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was like just hysterical. Even more than like having it show up in the mail and it was a nice amount and all of that, because it was just like a duplicate of what happened on the last time I did this.
Yeah.
The better thing of it was just like the universe saying thumbs up, it's like, here you go. Okay.
And it was on day 2.
Yeah, that's what was so funny. It was oh man, you're kidding me.
Not only did you get it during a 10-day thing that you're doing, but you get it on the second day of it? That's crazy.
Yeah, it was like last week I had started and then we did the podcast and I think that was day 2 and it was that afternoon. So
wow.
That was so funny. And then I had something else happen that I hate telling this story, but I think I should tell it. Remember, it has nothing to do with the I love my life mantra, although maybe it does. It's all connected. But remember the part of the book that talked about if you're complaining about if you have a physical complaint in your body and you find yourself complaining about it, then actually you were actually complaining about something else before it showed up.
Right.
And then it even said, even complaining about someone else's complaining. And we were both like, oh, what? Okay, so last week, I don't know what day it was, but I had a conversation with someone and they were complaining a lot during this conversation. And some of the things they were complaining about had something to do with me, but it was like sort of ridiculous. Like I could tell they were just on a complaining bent and they could have complained about blue sky and white clouds. It was just like, it didn't really matter. And I was kind of, I just kind of asked some questions about it. Really? Like, okay, well, what would you have had different? And, there weren't any good answers. It was just, well, I guess but it was just complain. And so later that afternoon, I was with my husband and we were doing a project in the garden. It was beautiful. It was it was hot outside, but it was beautiful. And we were just talking about our day and just standing there feeling fine. And I started relaying this conversation that I had with someone who was complaining. And I was kind of complaining that they were complaining. And he was saying, wow, they were complaining about that? What a lot of complaining, So we were both commiserating about this complainer. What a complainer. What a whiner. And I'm standing there, and then we're standing there after the conversation, maybe 5 minutes, and we're just working on what we're working on. And all of a sudden I realize my ears and my throat are just hurting so much. Like a full-blown head cold, sore throat, ears hurting. And it's the middle of summer. I'm standing out in the blue sky and sunshine.
Yep.
And all of a sudden it hit me. What were you just doing? And oh my goodness, it was such it happened so fast.
Well, that's good actually, because it happened so fast.
And in such a sharp way. Like it wasn't like, oh, I kind of just noticed it's happening. How long has this been going on? Oh no, it's been going on for exactly 30 seconds. Boom. And I tended to it vibrationally as well as, did a couple little remedies that I know, but I mean, it was gone by the next morning. It was gone.
That's great though, that you got that kind. I mean, because it's always hard to see the threads, or not always, but it's often hard to see the threads and how they all connect together, and how one end of the thread connects to the other end of the thread, and so forth. You got to see the whole thread. How you started with this person who was complaining, you got into the complaining bandwagon, your husband did too, and all of a sudden you got a sore throat. I mean, that's a nice thread to see. I mean, the result wasn't real nice, but to see the thread, you knew, and now you could actually do something about it, which you did. So that was actually good, I thought.
Oh, I mean, the whole process was, I want to say, like 6 hours, less than 12 hours for sure. Like from the initial experience to me relaying it to us kind of becoming complaining about it and to the sore throat being gone. It was 12 hours. I don't know. And you're right. It's like things take so long to unwind and to manifest fully that we don't make the connection.
Exactly.
I mean, I think about it. If I would have told that story just like I told it and we got past that, and then, 3 days later, I never would have made the connection.
Exactly. That's what always drove me crazy, trying to understand how this law of attraction stuff worked, because I couldn't always see the connections. In fact, I usually can't see the connections. And that drove me nuts. Like, I need to be able to see it so that I can rationalize myself, oh yeah, this stuff actually works, or no, this is a bunch of rubbish. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't connect it. Yeah, and then all of a sudden there were times that would come along where, oh, now I can see a connection. I can see the beginning, I can see the end, I can see the middle, I can see the whole thread. Okay,
Yeah.
well, there's one proof. Any more proofs? I wanted more.
Well, and so, the whole idea that we were talking about with this current mantra that I've been doing, which is I love my life.
Mm-hmm.
1,000 repetitions a day. I love my life. I love my life. And when I got this idea in a dream, and when I woke up, and in the dream, I had been teaching someone this mantra and had been saying, but what this means is that you love everything in your life. The uncomfortable things, the painful things, the crappy things, the frustrating things, the wonderful things, the great things, the pleasurable, like all of it. I love my life, not just the good parts. I love my life. And so that's the connection there, is that, well, did I love that? Well, I kind of do.
Yeah.
Because it was great feedback. It was obvious feedback. And I did the pivot and took care of it.
And I think it's really important to recognize that you can love something without liking it.
Yes.
That's so important.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you don't always, you may love someone, but you don't like everything that they do. And if they do something you don't like, that doesn't mean you stop loving them. It just means that you don't like what they just did. That's all. It doesn't have anything really to do with whether you love them. Well, the same thing is true with anything else in our lives.
Yeah. So that was I thought, I guess I should tell the story because it's kind of powerful.
It's a great story. I'm glad you did. Thank you.
So take away from the story that you have the power, and that the things you say, cause a vibration, and that vibration is going to resonate with something else that's vibrating on the same level. And it could be a sore throat or something you don't want. And so you have the power to pivot and to change your words and change your vibration and change your experience. That's the takeaway. Not just thinking about, oh yeah, that co-host on the podcast, I hear she was complaining a lot.
Yeah, well, that also can happen too. That's possible. But I agree with you. I think that is a good thing. In fact, I also was noticing a conversation that was had on Facebook, in one of the Facebook groups about law of attraction, where somebody posted something about, what do you think of when you hear the word India? And people were putting out all kinds of stuff, yogas and spirituality and so forth. One guy posted something like, no toilets and rapists. And he got hammered for that one, for saying that. And he was going on like a really bad negative spiral. You could tell every single comment was down, 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 really, really bad. And I felt bad for him on the one hand, and on the other hand, I felt like, well, yeah, you're the one who's doing the attracting. And it's a strange thing, because when something like that is happening to us, when we're stuck in that, or seemingly stuck in that, it seems like we're stuck. It seems like we can't get out of it. There's nothing we can do. And yet we see somebody else going through it, and we say, well, that's just a negative spiral. You
Right.
just do the pivot and get out of it.
Well, and that's the thing, is that in spite of, or because of, or in alignment with the law of attraction, there are consequences to the things that we say and the things that we do.
There are, yeah.
And sometimes, even though we can turn things around, I did suffer with a sore throat and my ears hurting for a couple of hours.
Right.
So, I mean, and when you say something that's derogatory or offensive, often there's a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So, we do attract some of these things, and then some of it, it's very obvious common sense that, well, that's the way we behave, then we might have to pay a consequence.
For me, the hardest part was accepting that we don't just attract some of it; we attract all of it.
Yeah.
That was the toughest part for me, and it still is sometimes. There are times when, I have one of those rats moments where, oh rats, I just attracted something else. I can't believe I did that. How do I get out of this terrible spiral I'm in? Oh my God.
Well, you remember there are no mistakes. There's just human experience.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
And what if I came here because I actually wanted to experience whatever it is?
Boy, was I crazy. I mean, I was just absolutely nuts to come here for that reason.
I want to experience it all. I want to experience it. Yeah, I don't know why we do what we do, but
Often we don't even know ourselves. It is interesting, though, how often, even when we have those negative spirals, when we get into those really bad places, they inevitably, one way or another, sometimes in ways we can't even detect, but they inevitably lead us as springboards to something better.
oh yes,
I mean, it's amazing how
definitely.
often that happens. And that's the part that I'm still trying to kind of internalize. I've learned it. I've been talking to Joel for years where he's told me about all his springboards. And so intellectually, I've come to believe it, but internalizing it is a little bit different. But I'm
You know,
getting
you
there.
you use the visual of a springboard, and I like the visual of a slingshot because with a slingshot, you put the whatever it is, the rock, let's say, in the slingshot, and you pull it back, and then you let it go, and it zooms out forward,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And the idea is that that same experience that feels like it's holding you back, that feels like it's pulling you backwards
Was
to where
pulling
you
back on
don't
the
want to be,
slingshot.
is often is often the same energy that is used to propel you forward.
Mm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so we can remember that when we're during that time of feeling like we're being held back or pulled back, or you know or we've gone back to some place. Oh, like, why am I standing out here in the garden complaining about this situation?
Well, that's the skill. Like you just said it right there. We can remember that because I often don't remember that. I often don't remember what the positive side is, what the good side is, and it's. I think probably the biggest part of the skill of learning to be a deliberate creator is in effect stretching my own attention so that when I'm in the midst of that darker place, I can actually remember the turnaround point. I can remember how things turn around because of what I'm thinking about or what I'm feeling about or how to do it, how to pivot, how to bridge, how to do all the different modalities and processes that Abraham talks about and that other gurus talk about. Just remembering to do it, that alone is big.
Yeah, it's awareness,
Yeah. Hmm.
mindfulness and awareness and attention, like you said, just paying attention. And all of that just takes practice.
It does
And
come with
and
practice.
yeah, and we just, it's like anything else. It's a relationship. And when we form relationships, the people that you're the closest to, the people that you know the best, the people that you know the most about, and they know the most about you, are the people that you've spent more time with
Hmm.
connecting. I mean, relationships take time.
They
There
do.
isn't really any way around that. To build a deep, strong relationship, you've got to invest the time.
Hmm.
And some of them come easier than others. I mean, I know that I have people that I've met in my life that I feel like I knew them well right away, and we just clicked. And and so, yeah, sure, that's the case as well, but you still have to invest the time. And I feel like our relationship with law of attraction, our relationship with ourself, our ability to know ourself,
Hmm.
all of that takes the time. And
It
so if you're
does.
willing to put in the time and put in the practice and be easy on yourself, recognize there are no mistakes, just human experience, keep moving forward, you get to that place where your awareness gets stronger and better, and your attention span gets better,
It
but you
does.
still might get a sore throat
Well,
or
sometimes, yeah, but they don't have to last. That's the whole point. If you're mindful, if you're aware, then it doesn't last because you shift the
yeah.
thought pattern, so it goes away.
Yeah, I'm still kind of in awe of the whole thing. It was like,
You and
wow.
me both.
Well,
It,
so let's I was just thinking about, you were talking about, we have two new co-hosts.
that's
So,
right.
yeah, how many of us are there now? Seven of us?
Seven. There's
Eight of us?
seven. Yeah, yeah.
Yay.
Joel,
And so,
David, Tom, Cindy, Wendy, Linda, and Patty. I'm like, oh my god.
amazing. So I want to make sure, that we remind people to subscribe.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
imagine with the new co-host, we've got a bunch of new listeners as well.
Well, you got 40% more reason to listen now because there are 40% more co-hosts than there were before. But absolutely, you want to subscribe to keep getting all those podcasts coming to your smartphone or your tablet or whatever you listen on. Now, of course, now most of our listeners are subscribers already. We do know that, and we love that, and we're grateful for it. But we're thinking particularly right now of people who are new to the podcast. Maybe this is the first one they've listened to, the one we're talking on right now. And if you're liking this, if you're enjoying how this feels to be a listener, well, join the millions. Become a subscriber. It's so easy to do. It's free. You just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. And right below the broadcast player that you can listen to the show live, if you want to listen live, you'll find, among other things, how to subscribe to the podcast. It takes about a minute. It's free. In most cases, you don't have to do much of anything except click a link. In some cases, you have to, depending on your device, you have to install some software, but it's really quick. You just do it through the Play Store if you're on an Android phone, or through the iPhone App Store if you're on an iPhone. And once you've done that and you take the steps listed there in order to get yourself subscribed, you get all these episodes, 45 a month, coming right to your smartphone. So you can listen to every single one. And you can even be a binge listener. We have binge listeners. Did you just know that, Cindy? We have binge listeners.
Awesome. Well, and the other thing is, you were mentioning a minute ago, that there's a live player and you can listen live. And the other thing you can do is, if you're listening live, you can call us.
Yeah, oh, we love calls.
That would be awesome.
They're fun. Yeah, it's really easy. There's a phone number you can call. There are a number of phone numbers. There's a main phone number here in the U.S., but there are also international phone numbers. So you can call by phone or anywhere in the world. You can there's a link there. You can download the Zoom platform application that we use and connect in directly that way. And no cell phone minutes at all used. I mean, it's just direct connection at that point.
Yeah, so we would love to hear from you. We always enjoy that. And any way you reach out, email, call us, send us a message, contact form, whatever. We love to hear from you and to hear, the little things that you're gleaning from the show.
You can try carrier pigeon, but I can't guarantee that it'll get through because of the cats. But other than that.
Oh, the cats, the kitty cats. Yay. So for the past few months, actually, I think we've been reading through Money and the Law of Attraction, Learning to Attract Wealth, Health, and Happiness. Esther and Jerry Hicks, The Teachings of Abraham. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller. And we have had so much fun with this book. There has been so many little nuggets that we have read and then dissected. And that's the fun thing.
Oh, yeah.
But today we got to part 5.
Yeah.
So this book had 4 parts. The beginning of it was teaching us some tools to use. And then we went on to learning about how to attract money and supply to us. And then we moved on to some areas about health and wellness and healing and well-being. And now we've gotten to part 5, which is careers as profitable sources of pleasure. I love that title.
Well, I think it's actually a title about this podcast, because that's exactly why I do the podcast. I do this as a career that is a source of pleasure. That's my profit right there.
Well, I love it. I love careers as profitable sources of pleasure, because I don't think that a lot of people think about their career that way.
I know I didn't for the longest time, and I was miserable as a result.
Well, it's like the career is the source of profit.
Mm-hmm.
And then something else is the source of pleasure.
Yeah, that separation doesn't work. I can attest to it. It just doesn't work. All it does is just make you feel miserable.
Yeah. And we've joked about it before or been serious about it. But
yes.
Like, for instance, the Monday, I talked about that I specifically decided that Mondays were going to be awesome because I was so tired of people being like, oh, it's Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Little tweaks like that. And I realized that, well, if your career is Monday through Friday, and if all it is a grind to bring in money so you can exist, and then the weekends are your time that you do the things you find pleasurable, then no wonder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You basically set yourself up that way.
So this section apparently is going to teach us how we can combine the two and have our career be a profitable source of pleasure?
Well, it also starts with a dialogue, once again, between Jerry and Abraham. And in this dialogue, Abraham behaves in a way we don't see very often. Abraham asks questions, which is kind of unusual for Abraham.
That is. Well, let's dive in.
Okay, so the first subtopic is entitled My First Steps in Career Choice. And Jerry says, how would you suggest we know if we've chosen the right career, and how can we be successful at the career we've chosen?
And Abraham asks, Jerry, what is your definition of career?
Jerry says, well, a career is like a life's work, an occupation that people could throw themselves into and put the best and the most of themselves into. And of course, in most cases, people would also want to get a financial return on that.
And Abraham says, what are you meaning by life's work?
So Jerry says, well, some work that people would plan to spend the rest of their lives doing, like a job, a profession, or a business, or a trade.
Are you telling us that it is a widespread belief or accepted desire of your culture to choose a career and expect to live happily ever after within one topic forevermore?
You can tell that Jerry is feeling the land move underneath his feet. But he says, well, as long as I can remember, it has been traditionally so. From the time I was very young, people began asking me what I was going to be when I grew up. It is interesting to me now to realize that even when I was a very young child, the adults around me had instilled a sense of urgency in me to choose a career. And I remember watching the milkman delivering the beautiful, delicious milk in glass bottles and thinking as I watched him drive away that that would be my choice for a career. And then I witnessed a policeman actually making my mother stop her car by running her off the road.
Whoa.
And I was in such admiration of anyone who was able to get my mother to do anything that for a while I decided that I'd be a policeman.
That's hysterical.
Not long after that, a doctor set my broken arm, and I thought, I'd like to be a doctor. And then our house caught fire, and the idea of being a fireman seemed like the best idea. And even after becoming what many would consider to be an adult, I am still observing and considering the multitude of options from my ever-changing perspective. And so those around me were a bit disappointed that I kept moving from thing to thing rather than settling on one thing for my life work or career.
Wow.
That's quite a question. He didn't even ask a question. That was a statement. That was quite a statement, too.
And Abraham says, many people, as they read your childhood story of the events of your life influencing your ideas of what you wanted to be when you grew up, might call your ever-changing ideas childish or unrealistic. But we want to acknowledge you are always inspired from the events of your life. And when you allow yourself to follow the flow of those inspired ideas, your potential for a joyous experience is much greater than if you were to just select your career based on other reasons that people use to justify their choices, such as family tradition or income potential. It's not surprising that so many have a difficult time deciding what they will do for the rest of their lives because you are multifaceted beings and your dominant intent is to enjoy your absolute basis of freedom and in your quest for joyful experiences to experience expansion and growth. In other words, without a real perception of freedom, you will never be joyful. And without joy, you cannot experience true expansion. So, childish as it may seem to many, it is natural that your life inspires your next adventure and your next and your next. We encourage you to decide as early in life as possible that your dominant intent and reason for existence is to live happily ever after. That would be a very good career choice, to gravitate toward those activities and to embrace those desires that harmonize with your core intentions, which are freedom and growth and joy. Make a career of living a happy life rather than trying to find work that will produce enough income that you can do things with your money that will then make you happy. When feeling happy is of paramount importance to you and what you do for a living makes you happy, you have found the best of all combinations. You can become very good at feeling good under all conditions. But when you become good at reaching for your vibrational balance first, and then attract circumstances and events to yourself from that happy place, your potential for sustained happiness is much greater.
Yeah, really good stuff there. And one of the first thoughts that I had a number of thoughts as you were reading that, as they were expressing their viewpoint. One thought is one that you and I can both resonate with because you were a homeschooler. I helped create an alternative school called the Sudbury Model School, which, by the way, I've learned, Wendy found out for me, Cindy, that Sudbury is actually something Abraham knows about, which blew my mind because the Sudbury School is such a small model. But not only do they know about it, they've commented about it quite favorably on a number of occasions. I was like, oh my God, cool. That's really something. I didn't expect that. But the other thing that I also wanted to point out is that I know what it's like to hear and read this kind of statement when you are in a place of physical lack. And not just emotional lack, because obviously you have that too, otherwise you wouldn't be in the physical lack. But you're in the physical lack. There's not enough money coming in. You don't have a job or whatever it is. You just the income is insufficient to meet your needs. And the first reaction anybody has when they're in that place and they hear something like what Abraham just said about make a career of living a happy life rather than trying to find work that will produce enough income that you can do things with your money that will then make you happy. When feeling happy is of paramount importance to you and what you do for a living makes you happy, you have found the best of all combinations. And I can just hear my original response when I first read that. Yeah, but I don't have an income. I don't have that option. What do I do?
Yeah. It's hard to just decide to be happy when you can't pay the bills and you don't have grocery money or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't think it's an easy thing. But it's part of my mantra. I love my life, right? I love my life. I love the abundance that I experience, and I love my life when I'm experiencing lack. I know that's really difficult for some people to grasp because it was difficult for me to grasp for a long time until I gave myself permission to just love everything.
Yeah. I found that I think it's actually in a broad sense a two-step process. The first step is learning to take away the charge of lack, the charge of the feeling of hopelessness and of constantly being focused on there's not enough money, there's not enough money, there's not enough money. That taking that attention away from that is almost harder than the second part. But it's the part that I think you have to kind of do first. And the way to do it first is exactly what they're talking about here, and that is focus on being happy, which sounds so bizarre. But it really does make a difference. And then after you've gotten yourself to the point where you can say you're feeling happy at least, a significant amount of time, even if it's not a majority, and you're experiencing it more often and you're feeling it more often, then you can start being more specific about attracting what it is that you want to attract, such as, a high-paying job or whatever it is, whatever it means to you to have the more money. And when you do that, now you're attracting from the high-flying place rather than the low-flying place. You're from high vibration rather than low vibration, good feeling rather than bad feeling. And you end up getting better stuff that way. Because that's the problem.
I also like the idea of, appreciation.
Yeah.
And we talked about this. We learned this in the beginning of the book, where we talked about two sides to every situation. So there's, if we talk about money, there's an abundance of money and there's lack of money.
Mm-hmm.
There's money and then there's the absence of money. And there's health and there's the absence of health. Every topic that we can choose, we can find both sides. And that sometimes when people really do honestly think that they're focusing on money, they're actually focusing on the lack of it. And one of the things that I did years and years ago, when my kids were little, actually, is I decided to always make sure that I was attempting anyway to focus on what there was plenty of and not what was lacking. Mm-hmm. Because in the world we live in today and with the marketing that we hear every day, I don't care really how much money you have coming in, you can find something that you're lacking, right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't have a yacht, if I was living in just total luxury, I could probably find a handful of things I still couldn't have or whatever. So we can all do that. And that's not what we want to do.
Not at all.
We want to focus. And so one of the things I did when my kids were very small and when, we didn't have every single thing that we always wanted is decided to focus on what we did have. And I made a habit of paying attention to what I had more than enough of. And I did this all the time in little ways. Like, I want to make a cup of tea. What do I need? I need a tea bag. Look, I have a whole box. I have more than enough. I need to wash my hair. And how much shampoo do I need to wash my hair? About a teaspoon. Oh gosh, I have a half a bottle. I have plenty. I have more than enough. I started paying attention to all the areas where I have more than enough.
That's a nice approach. I like that.
And so that was putting the focus on appreciation
and abundance.
And abundance,
yeah.
Right. And I remember one time when we did this for years, I remember one time my kids, we were out of something, and I'm trying to remember, but I think it was some kind of spice. We were out of something, and my kids were at this time old enough to be driving and to be out, and they both brought some of it home. At the same day, they both had been out and been at a store, a market somewhere, and grabbed whatever they thought we were needing. And we got home, and it was something. It's like, now we have 3 jars of it or whatever. And they were joking. They were like, "Well, we have more than enough, Mom. There's more than enough."
Yeah, right.
So if we put our focus on happiness when we are thinking that we need the money to make us happy, we learn something else really valuable in that process. Because believe me, as a life coach, I've coached people before that had more money than, I don't want to limit myself, but probably have more money than I'll ever see. I mean, more money than, you hear people talk about more money than you could really spend in a lifetime. And had them still, number one, be anxious about money, still feel concerned about money, still be unhappy. Those things don't stop. If that's who you are, they don't stop when the money comes in. They just get bigger because there's more money to worry about.
Well, that also raises a question, because we're taught that what we predominantly focus on is what we predominantly produce. And what you're describing sounds like somebody who's predominantly focused on lack of money, even though they've got all this money, which raises the question, how do they get the money? I mean, they couldn't have gotten the money through that attitude. That wouldn't work. So there had to be something else that they did.
Well, remember that we are more complicated, and our thought processes are a lot more complex generally than just thinking about laser focus on one thing. Right? I mean, that's why it's so hard for us to learn how to laser focus in on the thing we want. Because we've got this mixture of thoughts. So it's really important to be able to understand that your happiness is going to be found within you, and it's not going to be attached to something outside of you. Fleeting pleasure may be attached to something outside of you, right? It's like, I love cheesecake. I love chocolate. I love going to Europe. Like, those things are pleasurable for me, but they're not really providing my happiness.
But they are fun while you're doing them.
Yeah, they're fun and they're pleasurable. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, sure, pleasure can be attached to those things. They're pleasurable. But if there's unhappiness, it's coming from inside me. And I can go watch a funny movie and have a great time and laugh for a couple hours. But if that unhappiness is inside me, it's still going to be there when the movie's over.
Very true.
So learning how to find the happiness, choosing to be happy, choosing to find the happiness. I think that's part of the method here to, when feeling happy is of paramount importance to you and what you do for a living. Now they're saying makes you happy. I feel like there's a different twist here, and that is, if something's making you unhappy, we need to be aware of it and do something, right? Change something, whether we change our perspective or whether we drop the actual thing.
And that's actually, I think, what the root of the real answer is regarding how did the person attract all that money in the first place if they have all this negative attitude about money? Because, like you said, we're complex beings. We're very complex beings, and as complex beings, we don't always have the same thought. You said it yourself. There's no laser focus going on there, which means it's quite possible for somebody to attract money and then repel it. It's quite possible for them to attract it in large amounts and then be repellent about it.
What happens all the time?
Yeah, it's not like that would be unusual. That would be normal. We tend to think that once you have a particular kind of thought, you always have that particular kind of thought. That's like the little stuckness that a lot of us have, probably most of us have. But in simple fact, we don't. I mean,
No.
if you actually study our thoughts throughout the day, and I've done it, I'm actually a student of this. If I study my thoughts throughout the day, I am blown away how often I shift. I mean, often without even intending to, often without doing it as a deliberate creator, just shifting my thought because some X thing happened and all of a sudden I flip-flopped on something. I wasn't intending to flip-flop on it. I just did because that's the way I react to whatever X is. But my point is that I do it all day long. And I do it all week long. And I do it all month long. I do it all year. I'm doing it all the time. Everyone's doing it all the time. So the real answer is, how does somebody attract that? Because they aren't always attracting that. Their attraction point changes. Their perspective changes. What they focus on changes.
And, you will hear stories that people will say that most millionaires have lost their fortunes at least once.
Yeah, you hear a lot about that one. Yeah.
So, and I just think that's because of the fact that we often are scattered. We don't focus. We don't teach ourselves. We don't spend the time investing in learning how to hone our focus to where we can laser focus on things. And then the other part of it is that we're human and we're having a human experience. Mm-hmm. And humans get anxious about things sometimes. Even the ones that know how to attract bazillions of dollars get anxious about what they've attracted. I mean, those things are normal human experiences.
No, of course.
They're not wrong. They're not bad. They just are the things we experience here on Earth. Welcome to Earth.
Yeah, right. Now, of course, the other objection that comes along from that same person in that same place of lack is, okay, well, maybe those wealthy people do have times where they're attracting and other times that they're repelling. But they get the up and down. I got wealthy and then I lost it and I got it back. Why is it that I'm always in the lack? I never get into the wealthy range at all. And once again, it's the same answer.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, well, it's the same answer.
It's exactly the same answer. I mean, what really happens is the person who is able to attract the money and then loses it and attracts it back, they're able to stay with that laser focus long enough and intensely enough and with full enough belief that they actually get the money in a big way. Whereas those who never actually get there, they lose their focus quicker. So they're oscillating. They're just oscillating in a much smaller range. But it's still the same oscillation going on there. Sometimes there's a little bit more money, sometimes a little bit less money, but it's the same kind of thing.
I think it's easier to focus on lack when it's extreme. It's sort of like
it is
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we really do. There are certain things we need, and in our communities, money is most often attached to those things.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
This idea that I love is kind of wound up in that last paragraph we read, that you can become very good at feeling good under all conditions. But when you become good at reaching for your vibrational balance first, isn't that what we say? We say this every podcast.
We do.
Alignment first. Alignment first. And so often, I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of making a plan, thinking, okay, this sounds good. This sounds like it'll work. And getting busy working on it and realize I never took the time to really get in alignment first.
Oh, yeah. I had that exact experience yesterday. Yesterday was a tough day for me. I mean, I had a great first podcast and a great second podcast, and everything in the middle was, ugh. And the reason it was, was because I was dealing with stuff that actually had some very negative stuff associated with it. And after all was said and done, I realized, oh, darn, I never got myself into alignment. Oh, no wonder.
Right? And here's the thing is that alignment can be really quick. And the more you do it, the quicker it can be. It's not always quick. Sometimes it takes a little more effort. But really, it can happen very quickly. But it's so important that it happens first.
It's also really easy to fall out of alignment quickly. Because, like I said, yesterday morning's podcast was wonderful. I was high at the end of it. I was feeling really good. And then the moment I shifted my attention to the next task, it's like I completely forgot about the high. I just pushed it right out of my mind in a split second. And all of a sudden I was into the woe is me, oh God, I got this really tough thing I have to deal with mode. I just threw away all that wonderful energy I built up. I just tossed it right out the window. God.
You slammed on the brakes.
I did. I slammed on those brakes hard and I shifted into reverse. Oh, wow.
Well, it happens to all of us, but it's wonderful to talk about it now because it's an example that you recognize, like, okay, alignment I want to put, I have a Post-it note right here that I can see. It says permission granted.
I like that. That's good.
And I'm going to put one next to it that says alignment first because
I
don't know why I don't already have that. It's so important. So moving on, we have this section. What do you do for a living?
Right. So the conversation's continuing here. Jerry asks, there are cultures still today, in parentheses, usually we call them primitive or savage, who seem to live in the moment without jobs. In other words, when they're hungry, they catch a fish or find fruit in a tree.
Abraham says, will they be reading this? And then this cracks me up. In parentheses, it says fun.
Right.
Like Abraham has to spell it out for us when they're joking.
Well, they've learned that their jokes don't always play right, so they have to give you a clue. Okay, there's a joke going on here.
Their jokes don't always land.
No. Well, they're working on. That's what happens when you're non-physical. You're still working on the delivery, right?
Yeah, right. So Abraham says, what is the basic category of people you believe will be reading this?
Jerry says, well, people who believe it is essential to have some sort of an income-producing job.
And what do you believe is the predominant reason that people believe they should find a career early in life and then pursue it for the rest of their lives?
Well, of course, I can't speak for everyone, but it seems to almost be a moral or ethical position that we should or ought to find work that produces money. In other words, it's considered to be inappropriate to receive money without giving something back for it or without being productive in some way.
Abraham says, you are right. Most people do feel a need to justify their existence through effort or work. And that is
phrases like that. I got to interrupt you. Phrases like that, they just slay me. Justify your existence. Like, oh God, is that really what I'm doing?
I know. Most people feel a need to justify their existence through effort or work. And that is perhaps the reason why the first question that you ask one another upon meeting for the first time is, what do you do for a living?
For about 40 years, I earned my living by working about an hour and a half a day. And often people would voice a sort of resentment that I could have such an income without putting out more time, which would usually evoke a justification from me as I would then explain how much energy I expended during that 90 minutes. And how many years it took me to become good at what I did, or how much driving I had to do to even begin my work. In other words, I always felt a need to justify that I was actually paying a fair price for what I was receiving. Oh, wow.
Oh, I see this. Absolutely. Right? It's like, he's like, but I work really hard during that hour and a half.
I've done that. I have said that. Oh, jeez. And what's even worse is we're saying it not only to others, we're saying it to ourselves.
Well, this is really, really valid stuff here. And it really does occur. Yeah.
It does.
Abraham says, when you're in vibrational alignment, which means that you're in alignment with the source within you and that your own desires and beliefs are in balance, you never feel a need to justify to another. Many people attempt to justify their behavior or ideas to others, but it's never a good idea to use opinions of others as the guide that you're seeking alignment with rather than your own guidance system. Many people early on in your experience attempt to demand your compliance with their rules and opinions. But if you allow what they want to be central to the decisions that you make, you only get further and further out of alignment with who you really are and with the intentions that you were born with, as well as those that have evolved from the life experience you're living. You will never experience the deliciousness of feeling free until you release your desire to please others and replace it with your powerful intention to align to who you really are, to your source, by caring how you feel and choosing good feeling thoughts that let you know you've found your alignment. When
I was just going to say that section, as you're reading that, I'm thinking about my reasons for doing this podcast. And I've been voicing that a lot lately. But my reasons are always involving how much I enjoy doing it and how I do hope that our listeners are enjoying it too. And I know that they are because of, we can see the numbers of how many people listen and how long they listen to each podcast and so forth on average. And that's always really reinforcing for me. And I'm sitting here asking myself, am I enjoying the podcast based on whether or not somebody else is listening? And I'm realizing, no, I don't. If I did, I'd be in the trap that they're describing there. Because you got to do it. You got to do it for what jazzes you, not for what jazzes somebody else. Otherwise, the jazz goes away.
Well, and so I want to add a little twist there, and that is that it is a basic human need to contribute.
Yes.
Contribution is a basic human need.
Yes.
And so when you are doing this because you love it, and you know that other people that are listening are also enjoying it, that's you not only contributing to your own happiness by doing something that brings you happiness, but it's contributing to the happiness of other people.
Right.
And so it's mutually beneficial.
And I think it has to be in that order. I think it has to be in the order of I do it for me first, and I do it for the benefit of others second, and they go together.
They do go together. It's a win-win.
It is.
So Abraham says, when you sense that someone is disapproving of you or attacking you, it is a natural response to defend yourself. But that need to defend will quickly subside when you've trained yourself into alignment with your inner being, because all feelings of vulnerability will have been replaced with a sure-footed sense of who you really are. No matter what choices you make, there will always be someone who does not agree with those choices. But as you find your balance and maintain your alignment, most who are observing you will be more inclined to ask you what your secret to success is, rather than criticizing you for being successful. And those who continue to criticize you would find no satisfaction in your justification, no matter how compelling your argument is. Good point, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not your role to fix the feeling of lack within others. It is your role to keep yourself in balance. When you allow your society, or even one other person, to dictate to you what you should want or how you should behave, you will lose your balance, because your sense of freedom, which is core to your very beingness, is challenged. When you pay attention to the way you feel and you practice the self-empowering thoughts that align with who you really are, you will offer an example of thriving that will be of tremendous value to those who have the benefit of observing you. You cannot get poor enough to help poor people thrive, or sick enough to help sick people get well. You only ever uplift from your position of strength and clarity and alignment.
And that last section is underlined and it's in italics. So they're saying this is really, really important. Pay attention to it. And I'm reading it and I'm saying, as you were reading it, of course that does. Why would anyone want to do that? You cannot get poor enough to help poor people thrive, or sick enough to help sick people get well. Why would anyone want to get poor in order to help poor people, get sick in order to help sick people? That on the surface it sounds crazy, and yet, how often do we do that? A lot.
Well, yeah, I love that example, because so often people will say that, well, it's not fair for me to have so much when other people have so little.
Yeah.
Right? It's that, and that will hold wealth away from us if we have that belief.
Same thing with sickness.
Well, I love that part, because most people in my experience see that a little bit more clearly. In other words, if you were to ask someone, but how does your being poor help poor people? It would be like saying that you can help people get well by being sick. And that seems ridiculous to me.
And yet, how often do we do that? Whenever, like, I can think of an example right now from our lives, from Louise and my life. A good friend of hers has stage 3 pancreatic cancer. What's the first thing we think of? And he's a really good guy. He's a really, really nice guy. What's the first thing that we think of when we think of that? Oh, how terrible it is. He has cancer. And, his chances of survival are really slim. And he doesn't deserve this. And his wife, who's a really good person, also doesn't deserve this. And look what I'm doing. I'm spinning this story of woe and grief and illness. I'm making myself sick. That's what they were teaching us early on in this book. That when you have a predominantly negative thought pattern going on, you're making yourself sick in the process.
Yeah.
So we like to think that I don't make myself sick in order to make somebody else get better. We think we don't do that, and yet we do that. We do it regularly. We do it as a normal way of reacting.
Yeah. And I love the idea that we talked about towards the middle of the book, that talked about how we know if we're benefiting someone else with our thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's really simple. It's that we feel good when we think about them.
Exactly.
And so when we're talking about someone and we're bemoaning their condition, it doesn't feel good. It feels sad. It feels uncomfortable. And so that's how we know we're not really benefiting them with our thoughts.
There's an old cliche that I think needs to be slightly rewritten in order to be a clarifying point here. The cliche is, laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. And I think it needs to be modified a little bit to say, laugh and you influence the rest of the world to laugh. Cry and you're the only one being influenced.
Interesting. Yeah. So seeking for what feels better. I want to ask this. You're talking about, because I have a situation that's similar. And so knowing someone that's been diagnosed, give us an example of the better idea for when you think about that friend.
I think about that friend as the healthy human being that I've known. I think about him laughing and joking. He's a real jokester. I think about him living the active life that he's been enjoying so much. He's a golfer, and I think they're both tennis players too, and they love it. They would get out every single day to play a round of golf or tennis or whatever. I think about him as being the active person that he is, about being the joyous person that he is. And that's the way I want to think about him in order to support him, so that if he can find himself in some way reaching for that level of happiness, now I'm supporting him.
That's beautiful. That's great.
Yeah.
I too am learning to, when I see something in someone's life, especially someone I know well or somebody I care about and love that doesn't seem optimal, to quickly change what I'm thinking about, because people are complex and multifaceted. And certainly I can find lots of good things to think about that person, happy things, things about them that are great qualities, things that they're doing well and things that they're enjoying. When I can think about all those things, then I'm being a benefit to them.
Exactly right. And you are a benefit to a lot of people. We know that both through the podcast and through the stories you share about dealing with your clients. For somebody who wants to get a little personal attention from you as a client, how do they reach out to you?
Oh, they can find me online at cindiechavez.com. It's easy. CindieChavez. I would love to hear from you. Reach out and say hello.
All right. Cindie, it's been great, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow morning.
I'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you do the same. We'll see you all next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.